They're coming here. They're waiting at the edge of the city. The piano round, buildings at night. And they'll take you one by one, and no one will hear you scream. No one will hear you scream.
Yo, what it do, everybody. So it's Walterdoom back for another episode of Film and Guts, and this is going to be our film episode of the day. So like I mentioned before, so there's two different episodes. There's a Guts episode and there's a film episode. The film episode is going to be more on reviewing films that I've watched, and most of the films are not going to be newer films. Most of them are going to be kind of like movies I've watched for the first time, and they could be new or old. Maybe some of the film reviews are going to be dealing with comparing, contrasting an original film to a remake. And at the end of every review, I am going to let you know whether you should stream it or skip it, because all of this is going to be mainly on streams. This is nothing that's going to be in theaters, so don't expect a review from me talking about Terrifier 3. By the way, it's a really good movie. But first off, if you are listening to this show on any of Spotify, Apple Music, Apple Podcasts, I don't know why I'm about to say Apple Music, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube, make sure you like, subscribe, and leave a comment about the episode. And also make sure to, if you really feeling generous, donate to my Ko-fi account. The money will go directly to the show, and hopefully I could get better equipment. So literally, I'm working on duct tape and rubber bands on my equipment over here. So yeah, just know, like, a lot of what you guys donate is more than likely going to go to better equipment, better ways to have the show and be presented a little bit better, and probably pay for guests if that was ever, a thing. Pay my guests for their time, man. But anyway, all jokes aside, all silliness aside, I'm going to go ahead and jump into this episode by talking about I Saw the TV Glow. Now, my history with this movie, I didn't like it at first. And I didn't like it because of the ending mainly. I thought the ending was really terrible. I didn't really care for it, and I thought it was really bad. Not to mention, also, I was kind of lost on a lot of things that was happening in this movie. So to kind of describe the plot is about this kid named Owen, who is played by Justice Smith, and is trying to survive life in the suburbs when schoolmate Maddie introduces him to a mysterious late night television show. So the show is called The Pink Opaque. So the show itself is kind of like this Sabrina the Teenage Witch. I'm not Sabrina the Teenage Witch. I don't know why I keep thinking that, but it's a Buffy the Vampire Slayer type TV show. It stars these two characters named Tara and Isabel, and even though they're not in the same city fighting evil together, they are connected by this thing called the psychic plane, which they have these gnarly little tattoos on the back of their necks. So those tattoos keep them connected, and it kind of helps them fight evil. This movie is written by Jane Shonabra, who also wrote the movie, or did the movie, Everybody's Going to the World's Fair. I probably fucked up that title too, but hey, it is what it is. But I'm pretty sure it is Everybody's Going to the World's Fair. I remember it's the World's Fair. It's the World's Fair movie, so I haven't checked that movie out, but I will be checking that out really soon. But anyway, the thing about this movie, and actually, let me rewind. what I'm going to do with these reviews, I am going to talk about the good, the bad, but with this movie, I'm not going to spend so much on the bad because after watching this movie, as y'all know, I am like, if you're paying attention to my Instagram, I am super obsessed with this film. I am like super obsessed, but I'm probably also depressed, but that's not even like here nor there. That's something that we have to talk about another time. But I gotta say, this movie is a very heart-wrenching film for a horror movie. And if you're in it for like the slash kills, I mean, you'll be surprised on what this movie does. Because if you're just expecting monsters galore in this film, it actually will take you by surprise, as it did me. I was taken by surprise on what was going on in the film. And the thing is that I like most about this film is that I feel like you could watch it two different ways. And depending on the two ways that you watch it, will dictate on how you feel about it. Hence why I'm not trying to focus so much on the bad, because I feel like almost there isn't really any bad necessarily in this film. Spoilers alert, but at least spoilers alert for this review. But just to talk about this film a bit, I'm gonna focus on a couple of scenes that are very intricate to this movie, which kind of like molds everything together and brings everything together for me. Like I mentioned before, the movie focuses on the two characters, Maddie and Owen, and eventually in this one scene, you have Maddie, who is Owen's. I mean, you wouldn't really necessarily say they're friends. I mean, they're friends, but they're not really like friends in a sense of like they always hung around each other. The thing is with their relationship is that Owen wasn't never allowed to watch the Pinko Peg because of his bedtime. So he had to find a way to watch it because he was always interested in the TV show. The thing is, Maddie, she lives a life where her parents don't really care. So she's been able to watch the TV show just like whenever. Owen eventually sneaks over to her house and watches the movie not the movie. He watches the TV show with her. And that's how his obsession starts with the Pinko Peg. Maddie ends up giving him videotapes of the TV show. She starts taping the episodes because he is still unable to watch the TV show. And he feels like he's missing out. And he becomes obsessed with it. It becomes his all-time favorite TV show. I'm telling y'all, I shouldn't even fuck this up because like how I'm talking about this, I watched this movie like I don't know how many times this year, but I should not really be fucking this up like how I am right now. But oh man, but he is really obsessed with this film. I'm not this film. Again, like I said, I'm fucking up over here, y'all. I really am fucking up over here, but he's really obsessed with this TV show. Now, going back to what I was talking about before, there's two ways to watch this movie, and depending on your mood, the way things are kind of presented in this film, because it is an A24 film, so we all know A24 films usually operate on metaphors for their storytelling most of the time. But the way you could watch this movie is you could watch it as more of like a metaphor to reality, or you could watch it in more of like the sci-fi sense and believe everything that's happening with the characters as gospel in a sort of way to kind of like put it. The one scene that kind of like is intricate to the film is when after Maddie disappeared from town, she does make her way back to the town where Owen is still staying at, and they talk for a bit, and she kind of like drops this bombshell to him. And by the way, everybody, I'm probably gonna put like spoilers alert, but there's spoilers in this review, so just be prepared. I'm about to spoil a lot of things if you haven't seen the movie yet. But I'm gonna be honest, spoilers shouldn't even like detract you from watching the film, honestly. But if you're one of those people that want to go in blind, I mean, by all means, yeah, please stop listening and come back later. But anyway, Maddie comes back. She comes back to town. She seeks out Owen. She tells him where she's been. Well, she doesn't tell him where she's been, but she tells him that she has been inside the pink Opeg. And Owen is like, "What are you talking about, woman?" Eventually, they meet up at this planetarium. Because I feel like she mentioned the planetarium before, and she mentions how like peaceful it is over there. But they meet up at this planetarium, and she kind of goes into this whole soliloquy where she tells Owen about how they are part of the Pinko Peg. So her story is really crazy. Like, she talks about how she had to move out of town, change her name. Homegirl was staying in like hostels and stuff like that. Had to take up a job at Build-A-Bear, and was feeling like time was moving, passing her by while working at this job. And she felt like life shouldn't even be like that. You know, I mean, how many of us has worked a job and time has passed by and we were like, oh my God, life shouldn't be like that. So eventually in this whole soliloquy, she talks about how on her 22nd birthday, she paid $50 to a dude that was hitting on her. You know, this dude that just like, he's a burnout and he just gets high all the time. She paid him to bury her alive. She describes in her whole story that throughout this whole moment, like, she's just fighting for survival, or feels like the whole experience is fighting for survival. And eventually, like, somehow her body transfers into the sleepaway camp on the Pinko Peg. And she realizes, like, oh man, it's the season 6 premiere, which is so crazy. But it's the season 6 premiere. I found our hearts, because their hearts get cut out brutally at some point in the movie from their big bad Mr. Melancholy and his crew. And yeah, she found like the Luna juice, and she wanted to make her way back to Owen, who is actually the character Isabel in the film, or from the TV show. But Owen says one thing that is very significant, and this is to the first point about watching the film that I want to make. He tells Maddie, like, this is crazy, this is insane, none of this is true, because all it is just us living in the suburbs. Now, Jane kind of talked about the film in many interviews, and they have mentioned how, like, this film has focused on talking about life in the suburbs, and just how, like, their life in the suburbs, living in the suburbs, was kind of interesting. I don't want to say boring, but kind of interesting, because for them, they more glamorized about being, you know, with the TV characters more so than actually dealing with real life. It's interesting because, like, for him to talk about the suburbs and Jane to talk about how the suburbs is not really that interesting. Like, there's no real issues that happen there. But it made me think about the album by Arcade Fire that came out in, I want to say 2011, 2012. One of my favorites, by the way, called The Suburbs. And the one line that always sticks out to me about that album is when I don't know the lead singer's name. I'm gonna be honest. I am terrible with, like, band members' names unless it's like someone I really, really love listening to. I love Arcade Fire, but I think I love that album more than any of their other works. But the thing that made the suburbs, I guess, what it is because in a line, Arcade Fire has this line in the song where they go, you know, we're fighting a suburban war and we're already bored, you know, and it's just describing, like, just how suburban life, you know, you don't really have much out there to do or deal with. There's no real issues that you have to really deal with living suburban lifestyle. Most of the time it's just made up stories in your head, or I feel like the way I interpret it is like you kind of make up your own issues living in the suburbs. So anybody that lives in the suburbs, you could correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what I interpret from that line in Arcade Fire's song. But the thing is that we're coming back to this film is reality. The reality of just like how being an adult sucks. So there's a lot of things that happen in this film before Owen and Maddie meets up. The thing that this movie does have a lot that it talks about, which I'm going to give it to y'all, it talks about things like death of parents, difficulties of living with mental health and trauma, comfort with sexual identity, and killing childish things and making adult decisions. So the first thing like I want to talk about is like just how death of parents can affect a person. In the film, Owen is dealing with like both of his parents passing away eventually. His mom ends up with like possibly like stage 4 cancer. She goes through chemo but ends up losing the battle to that. And I believe she died when he was like real young. I think he was still, I want to say like 14 in the film. At least that's how old his character was. I know his character was at least like 19 years old. I'm not 19 years old. What the hell am I talking about? His character was 14 years old. And because him and Maddie, they're like 2 years apart. She's probably like 16 or whatever. But either way, that's not important. The important part is like, his mom passed away when he was 14. His dad ended up passing away years later from I believe, heart attack, if I'm not mistaken. And that kind of like forced Owen to really become an adult. For him, he has to guide through trying to be not someone who is childish or just like skating through life or just like living through life through his parents, but just someone now taking charge of who Owen is. So I did mention about like one of the things that is in this film is just killing childish things. So one of the things that Owen had to give up, which ends up being like one of the tragic parts and turnarounds of the film, was his love for the pink Opec. I'm telling y'all, like, pink Opec is so, I mean, if I was watching this show, I mean, I'm gonna say this. The funny thing is, like, I probably wouldn't watch this show because it does look like a show for girls. But I'm going to say this. When I was a kid, I was really into cartoons. And one of the cartoons that I used to watch that probably is for girls is Sailor Moon. I don't know what about Sailor Moon that really interests me, but I think it was more so the anime style and just the way, like, the characters were fighting evil, and just like Sailor Moon had this whole dark aesthetic about it where the characters look very evil. I mean, there's like monsters in Sailor Moon that are probably more scarier than like anything you'll probably see in a Jason movie or like a Goosebumps TV show. So for me, I'm like, yeah, that was one of my girly shows that I liked, that supposedly was for girls, but I mean, who doesn't like Sailor Moon? I'm gonna be honest. I mean, it's like, who doesn't like Sailor Moon? I mean, I'm just saying. But anyway, point being I'm making is Owen had a love for the pink Opec, and that had to like get destroyed when he started watching the show again after his dad died. Now, when he was a kid, he was very obsessed with the pink Opec. Like, the first time he watched it, he saw it as like this dark adventure TV show where the monsters were very gruesome looking and horrifying. I mean, you had this ice cream monster man who is literally melting on all orifices of his face. I don't know why I was struggling saying that so much. Y'all can tell I don't use that word very often, but but either way, like, you had this ice cream monster who was melting all over his face, to when he becomes like an adult and he's living his own life. He has his own family, which we never really get to see, by the way. And that is something I am going to touch on a little bit later on when we talk about comfort with sexual identity. But Owen ends up like watching the Pink Peg on stream, and what he watches isn't really necessarily the same show anymore. You know, it looks corny, it looks cheesy. The characters, you know, don't really look that scary anymore. And it makes some wonder, like, why did I watch this show in the first place? It kind of brings me to when I was a kid. I'm a big wrestling fan. I'm a big WWE head. I didn't watch wrestling religiously a lot. I mean, I've watched it on and off. I used to watch it religiously before they switched everything to USA. So hopefully, hey, Netflix, come through 2025. I can't wait. Eventually, like, you know, when I was a kid, not eventually, but when I was a kid, I was always enamored by how the wrestlers would fight each other. You would have the wrestlers just beat each other up viciously in the most craziest ways possible. And then it's like they would get back up. That's the thing. That was the biggest thing to me, is like them fighting each other and them getting back up. I always wonder, like, how did that work? How did that always work for them? You know, I used to look at them as like real life superheroes. Like, I would look at them as real life superheroes and would be amazed by the things that they do. When I started watching wrestling again around the pandemic, I was looking at how the wrestlers were fighting each other. And the first thing I noticed is, like, none of the throws and kicks that they were doing were really landing on top of each other. Hence why they call it sell a move. So the thing I started understanding now is that whenever someone throws a punch, they throw it close enough, but it's not really close-handed. It's kind of open-handed most of the time. And they're not really striking at the person's face. But the other person sells the move as if they are. So we, the audience, are believing that is what's happening to that character. They're getting beat up. I am amazed by, like, what I saw. I couldn't believe what I saw. And I thought to myself, like, well, this wasn't happening in 2001. So, interesting enough, I went back. I looked at a very old episode of SmackDown. Who do I see? Stone Cold Steve Austin. The rattlesnake himself. One of my favorite wrestlers. I think probably I would say I love The Rock more than him. I mean, I like Steve Austin, but I wasn't around the Stone Cold versus Vince McMahon era. You know, I caught all that afterwards. I was more around when The Rock was actually taking over WWE a bit, and he was just in those $500 luxury suits and everything like that. So for me, I have more connection on that aspect of wrestling and being a big fan of The Rock. And I still love The Rock to this day. I just don't watch his movies. I think they're god awful, but that's neither here nor there. But the one thing that I did notice when I was watching this episode of SmackDown is Stone Cold Steve Austin did not really connect on any of his strikes. It looks like he's striking these opponents, and I think he was fighting DX in this episode, but he's striking these opponents. He's striking X-Pac. He's striking Badass Billy Gunn. He's striking the Road Dogg. And the thing is that I'm noticing is that they're not really connected hits, but the wrestlers are selling it. And that is really a good art for the wrestlers. It's the art of sell. And I just now understand after seeing that episode and watching newer episodes of WWE, now I understand what they mean by you have to sell the move. I mean, my goodness, there are botches where like wrestlers don't even connect at all, but their partner ends up selling the move as if like it happened. I've seen some of these botches and I'm like, yo, how? It's fun. It's funny. Actually, it's real funny to me when you can actually spot a botch on wrestling, because it's like, oh, that's a botch. That wasn't supposed to happen. Oh man, it's fun to do that. But anyway, going back to like just what I'm saying about Owen is, with Owen, he lost the magic of like what the Pink Opeg was about after he lost how they were selling him a show that seemed like it was dark, but it wasn't even that dark to begin with. It was cheesy, it was corny, and it's kind of like you just lost the magic in your eyes for that TV show. And I honestly feel like, you know, we all come to that point where we watch an old TV show that we used to like as a kid. We watch it as an adult and it's like, where is that passion? Where is that magic that I used to see with it? And then you realize it wasn't even that magical to begin with. You know, especially like Power Rangers who are using an old Japanese TV show to do all their moves and fight all their monsters. But yet the only acting they really did was the acting as the teenagers. But I'm go ahead and move on right now to the next thought. Yo, Walterdoom here. And if you guys are enjoying this podcast and you want to donate to the show, yo, your boy got a Ko-fi account. Make sure you check that out in the link in the bio and donate whatever you can. Also, if you are a creator, a director, or anybody that's involved with podcasting or film and you want to come along on a podcast and talk with your boy, hit me up. My email is in the description, and you can hit me up on Instagram on Walterdoom Horror. Also, if you are enjoying this show and you love your boy and you want to give him like a few follows, likes, subscribe, comments, go ahead. It's free 99 to do that. Other than that, let's get back to the show. I talked about difficulties living with mental health, and I do feel like there's also a theme of that in the film. I believe that is with the character Maddie. She does have a lot of like mental health issues and trauma. One of the scenes that kind of highlights some of the problems that she's had, she does have a problem with being abused by her stepdad at home. In the first scene where Maddie and Owen are actually together as friends to watch the Pink Opeg, Maddie tells Owen like he needs to leave like in the morning time, because if he is caught at the house, her stepdad is going to break her nose. So I feel like that's probably like one of the things that kind of highlights the abuse and trauma for some of the characters and a lot of the things that the characters go through. And this is something that I really do like, and it goes back to what I said. It's like, depending on how you watch this film, you could either take it like a face forward, you know, it's all just a TV show, fantasy, sci-fi type shit, or you could see it as like, this is a metaphor to life, dealing with like a lot of things like abuse, sexual identity, and just like a lot of complexities that go within life. I mean, nothing is really black and white in this film, and I really do like that it's not. So Maddie, she's being abused, and her thing is like, she ends up running away eventually. Another thing about Maddie that is possibly true about her character, and they do this more so with like just how she behaves, is that she's probably a character with schizophrenia as well. And the reason why I say that is because there's a lot of symptoms in this film well, there's a lot of symptoms in schizophrenia that is actually reflected in this film with her character. So I want to bring it back a bit to when they were in the planetarium and Maddie was talking about how she was going to get buried by this burnout kid and how life just felt like it was passing her by and everything like that. Now, honestly, for a lot of us, becoming an adult, life does end up passing you by. I mean, there is nothing inherently crazy about time passing. Sometimes it does feel like we're in a simulation where, you know, time doesn't seem real. I mean, it's just honestly, like, depending on when this episode comes out, we were only like almost 5 years ago away from being in a pandemic. I mean, we're like literally almost 4-5 years away from everything in society shutting down because there was a global virus going around and no one was able to go outside or do anything unless they had a face mask on. I mean, it's amazing like where we are right now, and I didn't really think we would actually get through. I mean, honestly speaking, I didn't think we were gonna get through that, to be honest. I thought it was gonna be a good 5-7 years before we really see life turning back to quote unquote normal. But now I just feel like, what is normal, honestly? I mean, I don't know if y'all notice about all the crazy shit that's going on in the world right now, but I don't know what is really normal. I feel like we never really left the pandemic, but that's just me. Yeah, Maddie talks about how like time passes her by and just how life doesn't feel like how it should feel like life. But here's the thing, like possibly throughout this whole soliloquy of her talking about how life shouldn't be what it is, it's possible that she is having a schizophrenic episode and that everything that she has been kind of doing has been operating life under her own mental health that has went unchecked. There are a lot of people who live life, I guess, in a way, going through like different mental health issues and it goes unchecked. And I mean, I don't have anything concrete or anything that I looked at right now because this is just something I thought of. Like, she really just went through life, you know, going with schizophrenia, but no one knew she had schizophrenia. They just saw her as the lesbian girl at school and thought she was weird because she loved this TV show. But yeah, she was operating on her own mental health that has went unchecked, and it didn't help that she was being abused by her stepdad as well. So I feel like this movie really did kind of highlight those aspects in a clever way that didn't seem too, I guess, preachy about like, oh, we gotta be aware of mental health, we gotta take care of the people with mental health. It was more so like, if you blink, you miss it kind of thing. And if you caught it, you understand like, wow, that's a really messed up situation. And the last thing I want to mention is that this movie does talk about sexuality. And this movie is about like transsexuality and just like knowing like, well, not really knowing, but more so on the idea of just becoming a trans person is not as black and white as it is. Jane did an interview with, I believe, A-list films or A films, and one of the things that she mentioned about this movie dealing with trans cinema, this is what she wanted to put out there while creating this film. So what it says is a lot of those languages are not the classical languages of trans cinema or trans cinema, which again was made mostly by cis people. The classic idea of being sad and longingly gazing into a mirror and being liked. I've known from birth that I was supposed to be a girl, even though I have a penis. These narratives that were created by Hollywood and created by men in Hollywood And a lot of trans people adopt these narratives when they're trying to get their meds, but it's such a oversimplification for most of us. What transness and especially pre-transition dysphoria actually feels like, to me at least, is much more internal to try to talk about it is language that I'm borrowing from surrealism of David Lynch, the dreamlike nature of his films, or the body horror of David Cronenberg. And this movie does touch base on that, because with the character Owen, who is supposed to be Isabel, according to Maddie, is eventually seen wearing a dress. Now, the first time when I was watching this film, I was highly confused on like, why was he wearing a dress? Like, I'm thinking like, okay, the way you could be watching this, it could be taken in a sort of like couple of ways. It could be one, this could be a false memory of Maddie, of Owen. Two, it could be a memory of Owen's, but he was very embarrassed and kind of like repressed the idea or suppressed the idea that he did that situation because he was embarrassed and probably wasn't comfortable with the idea, but because it was his friend Maddie telling him to do it, he ended up doing it anyway. And by the way, this isn't anything that was in the film. These are all theories that I'm talking about right now. I swear, I feel like this should have been a gut show. In a way, you know what I'm saying? This should have been a gut show. But hey, we're gonna keep it going type shit. But yeah, it could have been that. I don't think I have a third one, but yeah, it could have been either one of those two. Main point of it all is that this movie does deal with like sexual identity, and being comfortable with your sexual identity as well, because even with Maddie, I feel like with her, she was never truly comfortable with being a lesbian in her little small town. And I feel possibly in this film, she probably did, if we're looking at it in the realistic sense, like, you know, real life sucks, whatever. I feel like if you look at it in this sense, you might feel like Maddie left because she felt like she was probably going to get brutally killed by the people in her town. Because even in a line in the movie, she does say she has to leave town soon because it's going to kill her. Now, granted, it could be taken as a sense of like her talking about the Drain Lords and Mr. Melancholy and his crew, but it felt like it was more like, if you look at it in a sense of life sucks, it could be seen as like the world is trying to kill her for being who she is. And that is not surprising that, you know, some of the people in her town would be that cold, ignorant. I mean, it is the 90s, so there's not much acceptance in that area. That's just my thoughts about, like, if you look at it in a sense of like realism, life sucks and what have you. I mean, you might like the movie, you might get depressed by the movie, but there is another way of looking at this film, because even though I'm saying all this, there is another way to look at this film. And both of them do get blurred together in a way that is so seamless. It's like, I can't believe what I'm watching. Like, after I was done watching, I was like, I don't know what I just watched, but let me watch this again to see what I missed. Is possibly, and this is going back to what Maddie said in the planetarium, if we are believing what Maddie is saying, let's say Maddie doesn't have schizophrenia and she is actually speaking gospel. What if the show really is about them being in the pink OPEG and them trying to get to season 6 of the show? I know I mentioned the big evil himself, Mr. Melancholy, but I haven't really gone into too much detail about him. Mr. Melancholy is the big evil, big moon man in the sky, big moon head and everything like that. He operates with his henchmen, Marco Polo, who are these androgynous looking beings. I mean, they got male faces but female bodies. So the thought of this movie being about sexuality really is there, and transness is there as well, obviously through Marco and Polo. But Mr. Melancholy, his overall mission throughout this film is to send Tara and Isabel and anyone into the midnight realm to sleep forever, and that's his way of killing the character. So in the show, because the show had 5 seasons, in the last season of the show, Isabel gets captured by Marco Polo, who pretend to be Tara. So these guys, well, these beings are, I shouldn't say these guys, these beings are able to change their identities and kind of fool people deceitfully. And they capture Isabel and put her in Mr. Melancholy's lair. They cut out her heart, put it in an industrial freezer. They fed her this juice called the Luna juice, which eventually is going to send her through the midnight realm. Now, Mr. Melancholy, hence why this is why I say like we're possibly in the midnight realm of this movie. Mr. Melancholy has this soliloquy that is really intricate to this movie. So Mr. Melancholy comes in. Mr. Melancholy has this snow globe of Owen, who is supposed to be Isabel. So Owen is in the snow globe, and Mr. Melancholy is showing Isabel like, hey, you're going to like it down here, and shakes up the snow globe. We see the beginning of the film, which is like little Owen playing in like the little whatever parachute thing that they were in. I don't know what they were playing in, but it's a funny scene because you just see this kid just jazzing it up in the back, just shaking his head. It's the most funniest thing you'll ever see. I mean, I'm just like, I don't have kids of my own, but it was just like, man, that's interesting. Like, that kid had a vibe about him. I hope like whatever kids I have, that kid has that same vibe, man. I don't want my kid to be all depressed and shit like that, like, but Mr. Melancholy does show Isabel like the snow globe of young Owen, who is supposed to be her eventually. And Mr. Melancholy tells Isabel, like, you won't know your name. You won't remember anything about yourself. You won't remember your superpowers. And you won't even remember the fact that right now you are dying at this moment. So after Mr. Melancholy chuckles a bit and opens their mouth wide, I mean, all I could think about was, hey, what that mouth do? Mr. Melancholy ends up having Isabel being buried alive. And it's a very dark part of the movie, I want to say. I mean, there's darker parts of this film. So coming back now to like the idea of like, okay, Doom, how is this like a show within a show? Well, how is this a movie about a show within a show? And I'm going to tell you right now, Team Doom, there's a lot of things that happen in this movie that seems very surreal, that kind of like, if you look at it as like a show within a show, it all makes sense in that sort of way. So, I mean, first things first, there's a lot of like unnatural movement, a lot of NPCs that move in twos. And the one thing I noticed is like, there's a lot of like Marco Polos everywhere. I mean, the town itself that Maddie and Owen live in, yes, it's a small town, but it seems like the population is like 25 or 50 people. It's not that many. Honestly, there's really not that many people. I mean, they have a scene in the bar. There's not even many people sitting at the bar. They have a scene in a grocery store. It's just Owen in the grocery store. It's very surreal. I mean, it's like, how often, if you live in the big city, how often have you been in a grocery store and there's only just you in there? I kid you not, if it's just me in the grocery store, oh, I'm living it up, because I don't have to deal with no annoying ass people getting in my way, pushing through. Oh my God, I was in Trader Joe's. I know that sounds so bougie as fuck, but I was in Trader Joe's like some time ago, and I was just really annoyed by how many people was kind of like walking through, not saying excuse me, just people kind of like pushing their way to try and get to wherever they need to get to. I truly was annoyed by that in many ways, and I was just like, I can't wait to get the fuck out this store because I'm ready to cuss a motherfucker out today. Like, but I couldn't do it. I was in a white person's neighborhood, white people neighborhood, black people can't do that shit, But in this film, there are a lot of NPCs. There's a lot of people that walk in twos. I mean, if y'all watch this movie again, if you watched it before, watch it again. There's a lot of people that move in twos, and it's just like not even the stoners that are like smoking together. It's not even just the two motherfuckers that show up in front of Owen's door after he learns about the whole Pinko Peg. Him and Maddie might be the superheroes and what have you, but it's everywhere. Like, even in the scene where Owen is actually walking through the hallway just to get the videotapes that Maddie is sending him, you will see like there's a lot of people walking in twos, and not only that, people who are actually watching him as well. We do talk about the concept of time because there is a lot of concept of time that does pass through. We do go through Owen's life in a matter of seconds, and this goes back to what Maddie was saying about time.
Villains and heroes actually have the exact same backstory. The villain story and the backstory of the hero are pain.
Yes.
The hero is almost always an orphan in some way. They're orphaned. The villain, if you'll watch the movie closely, screenwriters will put a scar on their face, a limp, some sort of speech impediment. What they're indicating is that this person has a painful backstory. So the difference between the villain and the hero is one thing. It's how they respond to pain. And the villain says, the world hurt me, I'm going to hurt it back. And the hero says, the world hurt me, I'm not going to let this happen to anybody else.
Wow.
It's just literally how you decide to react to pain that causes you to be the villain.
There is a lot of talk about concept of time, and like Maddie has mentioned before in the planetarium scene, that time seems to be going by a lot. Now, in this film, we do go through a lot of Owen's life, going through different stages. He goes from like being in 7th grade to the 9th grade to becoming an adult, and all the way to like when he's like an older, mature Owen. I don't remember how old he was, but I'm pretty sure he was like 40, 50 something or what have you. Still working at his job. But yeah, there is a lot of like concept about time flying by, and that like nothing really makes sense as time is going by and everything like that. And while like concept of time is flying by, a lot of Owen's life is not really changing at all. So there's a lot of emasculating of Owen. Now, see, here's the thing. If we are taking the movie as the Pinko Peg, as the TV show, and that all of this is Mr. Melancholy's doing, what we're seeing from Mr. Melancholy is building up a sense of security for Owen's character by emasculating him into comfort. So, or actually not really, I think that's a little bit of a stretch. Because, I mean, there's no comfort in like your parents dying and what have you. But I guess in a way, like, there's a lot of emasculation that's happening to Owen to where like the character themselves cannot move past just the level 1 standpoint of his life. So, like I said, traumatic situation. Mr. Melancholy threw Owen some parents. What happens? Parents die. Oh, Mr. Melancholy gives Owen a job. what does Mr. Melancholy do with Owen being in that job? Keep him there for many years. So Owen was working at a theater for like many years, and after the theater closed down, he ends up working at a family fun center. Now, mind you, Owen was living in a house with his parents. Eventually, the parents both died, and he keeps the house. I feel like with Mr. Melancholy, and this is what builds up a strong case for like possibly like this movie is about, the Pinko Peg. Like, we're looking at a show within a show, like, you know. But Owen ends up keeping the house, and it's like, to me, it's like, even though it's the 90s, I'm pretty sure it still wasn't cheap to keep the house, especially if you're working at a family fun center. I mean, that family fun center was literally like Chuck E. Cheese. So, yeah, how is it that Broski was still able to keep the house? like let's be for real about this. Like, be fucking for real, like they say. You know, how did Broski really keep this house like that? So there's a lot of like manipulation obviously going around in this world. And I mean, even with like the whole idea about the Pinko Peg, the TV show goes from like this really dark, sinister show to this now cheesy TV show that's like, should be like rated TVY7. If that's even still like a thing, you know. I did notice, like, in the movie of I Saw the TV Glow, Maddie, the last time her and Owen was actually watching the Pinko Peg together, because they only watched it together 2 times. The last time when they were watching it together, Maddie ended up crying during the show. She cried during the show. And if you're looking at it in a realistic sense, you could see how possibly like Maddie is probably like overwhelmed with life, and how everything is just like, you know, coming at her in a way that she was not ready for. But if you're looking at it in a sci-fi, this is the Pinko Peg world sense, she might have been actually realizing, that's me. That's me. And I am possibly dying right now underneath like some dirt. So I thought that was like one of the scenes that were very interesting. Again, like I said, Mr. Melancholy, he's a slippery dude, you know. He's a very slippery character in a way. But yeah, based on how you watch this movie, I feel like you can't go wrong with how you feel about it. Now, bringing it down in closing to whether you should watch it, skip it, or what have you. I would say if you are into A24 movies, if you are into stories about trans identity, if you're just like looking for like a simple, not really so much of a horror movie, but it is horror adjacent enough on a Cronenberg sense, definitely check this movie out. It's on HBO Max. But if you're just looking for blood and guts, don't waste your time and watch it and then complain about it on the internet afterwards. Ain't nobody trying to hear that shit. Anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and come back with the outro, y'all. I watched recently. So I've watched Terrifier 3 in theaters. Loved it. It was very enjoyable. It was gory as fuck, like it should be. The storyline to this movie is developing a lot. I mean, I've seen a lot kind of like a religious aspect to the film, which is something they kind of highlight in the second film, but you could definitely see like a lot of its influence is a battle of heaven and hell, which I do kind of like that. So, but it does kind of make me miss the old Terrifier Art the Clown, even though those elements were in Terrifier 1 and All Hallows Eve. Another movie that I watched was Nurse 3D. That one's a little bit more freaky for the freaky people out there. I mean, it's a titty horror, to put it kindly. A titty horror where this nurse, she's killing all these men that are cheating on their wives and girlfriends, and she has this thing for this other nurse, but because the nurse is like not really interested, she tries her best to, I guess, take her out the equation, or take her boyfriend out the equation, out of a realm of jealousy. This was more of a rewatch because I watched this like a long time ago. This was one of my drunk watches from back in the days. I don't really do drunk watches like that anymore because I'm trying to pay attention, but yeah, this one was one of those drunk watches because it was just a simple film that you could remember, and it's not really like story heavy, which I was watching and I'm like, yeah, the story is terrible, but definitely do remember a lot of what happened in this film. Third movie that I rewatched was Nightmare on Elm Street. Just recently watched that, the first Freddy movie, the one in the 80s. Enjoyed it with Heather Langenkamp and Robert Englund. I really don't need to mention much about it, honestly, because I mean we are all Fred heads here. Pretty sure some of y'all love some Freddy, but anyway, those are the movies that I've watched and rewatched. If y'all want to check those out, make sure you do. But other than that, I'm going to sign out for today. So this has been another episode of Film and Guts. Film and Guts, y'all. Oh man, that just rolls off the tongue a little bit better, right? Film and Guts. Film and Guts. Oh man, but anyway, Walterdoom signing out. This is America. Don't let them catch you slipping now. Stay diabolical, people. Peace.